In many ways, the topic of tonight's forum, Let's Talk Food, is emblematic of many of the changes we see in local government in Alberta, and particularly around the aspirations we now place on these institutions and our local government for supporting resilience, prosperity, and sustainable communities. For all of you, I'm pretty sure local matters. For a long time in Canada, we've looked in terms of policy and the development of strategies to our provincial and federal governments. We've looked outside the boundaries of the city and the city region for what to do about agriculture. Tonight, we're going to focus on our local communities, and in particular, we're going to focus on the scale of the region. Now, what does that idea of a region mean? Well, one thing it tells us about a landscape in which we all share and our prosperity is all determined. But it also tells us something about the connections that we can build in our communities and across that landscape to support change and to support innovation in new directions. So the aim of the panel this evening is to build a conversation, as I think Mary and Susan both said, about the unique roles of municipalities and local governments in fostering the development of local and regional food systems which provide access to quality local food sources. But we're also going to talk about how those food systems can support our local economy and make this a really vibrant place to do business in the agribusiness sector. Yet, I want to caution that when we talk about local, we probably know by now that that doesn't necessarily translate into positives. You know, I'm always conscious that when we talk about cities or towns as sources of sustainability, that there's a lot of optimism and possibility there. But we can also equally talk about cities and communities as potential sources of environmental problems. This is all just to say this isn't straightforward. This is tricky, complex business. And so I'm really pleased we have the panel we have with us tonight to not just tell us about what's going on, but to try to engage some of those difficult questions, the questions that we face as communities, the need to balance values across landscape, to think about new ways of working together. So we're going to try to get to some of those difficult topics tonight as well. I always think the language of urban agriculture is something discordant, right? We see them as contrasting ideas. It can feel somewhat uncertain when we're talking about it as well. But I think by shifting the scale to the conversation we're going to have tonight, and by building a conversation, and that's what we're here to do, between local governments and between those governments and the various communities that are represented out there on the floor this evening, we can use that language to inspire new ways of thinking and hopefully promote innovation and some durable change. So please join me in welcoming our panel. We have Mayor Lisa Holmes from Morinville and also President of AUMA, Chief Billy Morin from the Enoch First Nation, welcome. Mayor Tom Flynn from Sturgeon County and Mayor Iveson from Edmonton. The way this will work tonight is I've spoken with each of the panelists in the build up to this, and I have some questions and topics that I want to put to, and we kind of talked through what we think we need to talk about. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions for the floor, and I'll probably just intersperse those into the conversation we're having. There should be a couple people floating around with microphones. The best way to get a hold of them is to wave at them and then wave back at me so that I can see you. And we'll get those questions in as well. So thank you very much. We'll get going. Great. So probably the best way we can get started is just to give you each an opportunity to reflect on the topic from your own experience and what you're doing in your own communities. Mayor Holmes.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you for having me here. I'm excited not just to talk on behalf of the region, and Morinville is a very proud member of the Edmonton metropolitan region, but to highlight some of the work that we're doing in Morinville, a community that is the equivalent neighborhood in Edmonton. We have quite a few initiatives that we put forward when it comes to urban agriculture and food, things that we're really proud of and we don't get an opportunity a lot of times to talk about. Obviously, the work that we do in land use planning on a regional basis is important, but we have some local things that we do that I think are meaningful. We have an incredible edibles program we developed in 2011, fashioned after a very traditional and successful program in the UK, where we transitioned all of the flower beds and entrance sign, anything that was pretty well a place to put dirt in the ground that municipally was owned. we now plant food rather than planting flowers. And at first, it was an interesting conversation with our council why this was even something that we would want to do. They thought, no one's really going to come in and take advantage of that situation, but it's been an incredible 5+ years now. We have people that use this on a frequent basis. They've learned about food. We have edible flowers in there. We have programs and courses that we offer in relation to it. So it's become a really great way to bring local food and conversations about that back to our community. We also have a really great partnership with the town with the local high school and our urban agricultural program that we have through there. It's very successful. It gives the kids the opportunity to get to meet with local producers and learn about food in so many ways. But also we tie it into the community. You can purchase the food that they grow in our local Sobeys, which is also another way to be able to, in a small town, be able to access these facilities. We have community gardens, spaces like that. And probably something you may be the most familiar with is one of the things I think we're the most proud of is the production facility that we have in Morinville and the role that they have in regional food production and the systems. And that would be Champion Pet Foods. They are a local company. They have their production facility in Morinville, but they source all of their ingredients from within 50 kilometers of Morinville, and their distribution center is in Edmonton. So it touches all 3 of the municipalities here. It's a great opportunity for us to be able to highlight that the local food in our area is being value added, I guess, to steal Tom's phrase, and sent out to more than 80 countries across the world. So we have a lot of initiatives we do on a small scale, just in a local small community. So I'm pleased to be here to share those. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Morin.
Nwako magantik, kitam statinawao gakiao, natogi tobe sikasin maskeg sekochinia, Chief Billy Morin from Enoch, Cree Nation, and very happy and excited to be here. I bring a little bit of a different perspective. I would say my role in this conversation is to explain where we are as Enoch Cree people, and currently my role to be in this category of life is to lead my people on a decolonization path. So, and that's returning back to our roots and returning back to our old ways when it comes to food. Our people have struggled a lot with their diets and some of the things that we've had over the last half a century, and right now it's caused a lot of what I would say is a little bit of an imbalance in our community in terms of addiction and disease and diabetes, for example. And given we've only been in this relationship for 100 years, the scientific facts that we're still adjusting to the foods that are being brought to us are very real. But right now I see it as kind of a clean slate. And our people are ready to kind of move forward with a new relationship. And in that, very excited to be a part of this region and really define what it's going to be like going forward. So the one thing I'll mention in this conversation is bannock. That bugs me. Bannock is not a First Nations food. And I'm just going to get that out of the way right now. So don't ask me about bannock. It's greasy. A little side note, very proud of our history, and why that bugs you is my mushum, Alexi Morin, was chief at the turn of the century, the 1900s, and we have him on tape saying, in Cree, I can remember the first time I saw bread, I can remember the first time I saw sugar, I can remember the first time I saw liquor, and it kind of just humbles you in a way that we're still kind of defining and redefining our relationship with food in the local area. So just proud to bring that perspective, and hope to be a good dialogue today.
Thank you. Mayor Flynn.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and it's my pleasure to be here to represent a rural municipality just on the northern boundary of Edmonton and the city of St. Albert and around Morinville. I grew up in just north of St. Albert, and my family did for over 100 years there. We farmed in that area in big scale, so the acres and acres of grain and beef and those kinds of things. Now that I've been involved in all kinds of agriculture and agribusiness over the years, I've got a pretty good knowledge of what agriculture is, the way I understand it, what I grew up with. We're starting to see some change, however, that blends in with the urban agriculture discussion. We're seeing a number of our people that want to diversify on their farms to make some specialty operations. Things like prairie gardens that maybe many of you have been at. They produce a lot of products that they bring to market. They are probably involved this weekend. We have entrepreneurs that are starting to think about value adding, and I keep using that word, not in a petrochemical way, but because we have lots of that in the county as well. But they're looking at developing things that they can bring to the local market and add to it. I've got a young farmer that's in the dairy business thinking about going into the cheese business as well. So we're working to try and develop those things that will help us accommodate those. In our bylaws, we're just working through our land use bylaws, so we're trying to make space in there to identify those agribusinesses that might start on the farm that can either have markets on their place or they bring them to products to places in the city and in St. Albert and the towns. But I think we also have a large role to help to educate people that grow up in nothing but an urban environment to better understand agriculture and the things that go into it, the roots that are there. And our farmers, we've got a couple of really special ones, my neighbors, the Bococks here, that donated land, made a deal with the University of Alberta and the University of Farmers on their land. They understand that. They make sure that there is a mechanism to learn more about agriculture and improve it as we go along. So there's lots of pieces that I have some understanding of. So we'll stop there and let Don talk.
Thank you. Don.
Well, it's a privilege to be with you all here tonight in your city hall. It's great to be able to gather in this way to talk about issues that are important in our community. And there's very few issues, in Maslow's hierarchy that rank as high as food. I mean, I think water is about the only thing ahead of it now. So this is a critical discussion, and it comes at an interesting time when historically, local governments would have had very little to do with this. Unless you're a county with, agricultural mandates, no one would talk about it in the city. And Tom was saying that it's really important for, and I completely agree, that folks who live in cities have the opportunity to connect with where their food comes from so that their answer isn't the grocery store. Their answer is something richer than that. And I realize now that I was very privileged to grow up in a household where we grew some of our own food in the backyard, and so you get your hands dirty, and that's a great experience. I'm very grateful for it, because now I realize how many people don't have that experience in Edmonton and would benefit from it. And programs like City Farm and the community garden initiatives, which have just gone all over the city now, are reintroducing people to that, reconnecting people with that. And one of these days when I have more time on my hands, maybe when I'm not mayor, I'll start growing some of my own food again. In the meantime, I'll see you at the farmer's market. But I was also very fortunate to have an aunt and uncle who are third-generation farmers on my uncle's side out by Lamont. And so I was also, when I was a kid, fortunate to get to go to harvest and see how that works and be around animals on the farm. And I also lived just off I grew up right next to the university farm on the south side. So peri-urban agriculture and me go way back. Because the smell of livestock and people tending to crops and all of that was literally out our backyard. So now I realize that I'm an aberration, and that most Edmontonians go through their lives with very little connection to the food that powers that life. But there's a resurgence of interest in it, and that's reflected in all the folks who are out here, but also in the advocacy that has come to City Council, starting with our municipal development plan about 8 years ago now, a really rich discussion that also filled not only this room, but that room up there with 800 people who said we have to start talking about food and food systems in our city. And that led, as many of you know, to the Fresh Initiative and the food and agriculture planning for the city that addresses peri-urban agriculture, addresses transition issues in areas on the edge of the city, and also opens up, through some changes we made to our zoning bylaw, quite a few more opportunities for food growing, food value added, industrial greenhouse operations, different kinds of things that we're going to see more and more of. And I'm just so thrilled that you know, and Dustin's here. He was introducing earlier, is doing some very, very cool work with kids at West JP, Jasper Place High School, on aquaponics and sustainable agriculture and you know what I'm blanking out on what it's called. Hydroponics and aquaponics and permaculture. So yes, this is not my area of expertise. This is the problem. When you're the mayor, you're a generalist. So, and I'm sitting next to an actual farmer, so that's intimidating. But there's massive interest in this, and the city does have a role around policy. And finally, I think, you know, in an environment globally where trade is being turned on its head, where we know as Canadians we need to find new markets for our energy products, and yes, for our wood products. I would very much like to find alternate markets than the South for that. But we are a tremendous food producer. And so much of the food that we produce right now, we ship out just like we've shipped out our natural resources. And we have a chance. We didn't do it with timber. We didn't do it with oil and gas to the degree that we should have. We have an opportunity now at the macro scale with intelligent policy about trade and industrial growth around food value added, as well as very granular local initiatives to really grow wealth generation and solve local and global problems for food and create wealth for Canadians if we get this right. So I'm excited to see where we can go with that, and the central role that food and the food economy could play in the metropolitan regional economy as we come together to build a more regional strategy around economic growth for this region. So from the backyard planter to our long-term job growth strategy, I think this touches every single one of us.
Thank you. So I figure, you know, when I'm talking to people around this issue, the first question, and usually the sticky point, comes up around topics of land fragmentation, the preservation of agricultural land, how we balance growth with the preservation of those values, how we balance agriculture against the other values we see in those landscapes for our community. So could we reflect first on that topic about, you know, as a collection of municipalities and communities in this region, are we understanding the value of those lands in terms of the development of these agricultural and food systems, and are we doing enough, and what's the future in thinking about land preservation? Anybody want to go first? Sure. Mayor Flynn.
I'd be glad to. It's really exciting for me to see the things that we've done at the Capital Region Board and the Metro Mayors, and thinking about, you know, preserving agricultural land. The growth plan that's been put forward to the government right now is designed to have our metropolitan areas grow more dense, grow up instead of out. Not that they're not going to grow out, but we'll slow that down and try to make the preservation of agricultural land, especially good agricultural land, a priority. So the growth plan that we put together, through the 30 years of the plan, if everything goes the way it's planned, we should save the conversion of 250 quarter sections of land over that period of time, which is very significant. An initiative that the Bococks started by protecting the land that they have. And it's something that we need to do to help ourselves, support ourselves, and then we can value add the products and make something out of them for the local market.
Mayor Iveson.
Well, I might add that the same math that produces the savings of the 250 quarter sections of land, which is fantastic, also produces a $5 billion infrastructure savings. So density and growing up more and out less is good policy all around beyond food systems. But I want to address just a little bit the question, because, you know, I came to City Hall 10 years ago saying we have to stop sprawl and we have to save all the agricultural land. And in my heart of hearts, you know, I still believe that. But practically speaking, the trajectories of growth, the lead times of planning, that's a 30-year transition. It's not a 1 year or 1 month or even 10-year transition. But what we've been able to do through establishing these much higher density requirements for new neighborhoods is to ensure that we can accommodate many more people in a smaller footprint of land. And you'll have seen recently that the City of Edmonton and the County of Leduc came to an accord where we were able to significantly reduce, not eliminate, but significantly reduce the amount of land that we were asking for in our annexation. And the majority of that land on the west side is actually for job growth. It's not for traditional suburban growth. So you're going to see denser new communities there, and a continued commitment from the city to incorporate urban agriculture into that growth as well, just as we've tried to do in some of our new neighborhood plans and at Blatchford. So changing that pattern of growth is, I've discovered after 10 years here, a really difficult and long change, but it is worth pursuing, and that's the value of having a regional approach to this. Because if Edmonton tried to just stop on its own, then Morinville would probably double in size pretty fast, and Stony Plain would double in size pretty fast. And so you actually have to take a coordinated regional approach to this, which we didn't have before. So 10 years ago, we had no hope of containing it, maybe just leaping it to a new jurisdiction. Now we have a coordinated regional approach that will not only push those densities upward, and therefore consume less land, but also over time identify the areas outside of that 30-year shadow and growth trajectory that we want to preserve for the very long term, at a point in time when it's still economically feasible to do it because the prices haven't skyrocketed. So it's a long game, but bear with us, because I think there is a pretty strong consensus at the regional table among the mayors to do this work. And you start to, the best time to plant a tree is 25 years ago, the next best time is today. And that's what we're trying to do.
Mayor Holmes.
I completely agree, and I think one of the best things that we've done when we had the growth plan conversations, and I should say the magnitude of creating this growth plan is massive. This is an opportunity for us to hit reset on how we are planning for the future of growth in our region. And those conversations were very meaningful, to have people in the room from urban and rural municipalities and experts in planning and development that were able to have the tough conversations about these things, because you do get people like myself who, I do not come from an agricultural farming background. So to sit there and listen to these conversations, to hear the reasons why different municipalities require different things, was very powerful. And it took 2 years for us to have these conversations and processes to come out with this document, which is now, like Tom said, at the government for final approval. But the one thing I wanted to just make clear on my behalf is that Morinville has the ability to grow. We can grow up to 35,000 people. We're at 10,000 now. So growth and the land wasn't a big issue for us. Urban sprawl is an issue, but I have to say that the county stepped up, and rural sprawl is also a massive issue in our region. And this was the first time ever we had the conversations about what residential development looks like in a rural setting, and what the meaningful use of land is out there as well as within the urban. So if we hadn't have had those commitments from the counties in our region, the amount of land we would have saved would have been way less than the 250. And I love to also say, that's the equivalent of the footprint of St. Albert, Spruce Grove, Sherwood Park, and Bruderheim combined. That's a lot of land. So I think that having the counties there at the table committed to this was a huge step forward, and one that we've never seen, I believe, in the region ever.
Chief Morin, can I pull this into you? I know you've been involved in an integrated land use plan for the Enoch First Nation, and that you're addressing some of these challenges yourself as well.
Yeah, we kind of just want to be a part of the plan. In all honesty, no, we want to be a team player. As some of my colleagues around the panel know, that Enoch is not exactly an active member of the Capital Region Board of the Growth Plan, but I'm very happy to say that those inroads have been made with Mayor Don Iveson and the provincial government, and those discussions are ongoing. But like I said, we just kind of want to be a team player in the Capital Region. If you think of Enoch, it's about the same size as St. Albert or the County of Strathcona, and that's a pretty big deal in the Capital Region. And when we look at the development of land, the approach we might want to take, from just kind of gauging my members, would be it's 2,000 people on that area of land. And it's not necessarily always agriculture, but hunting. And we are very, very proud people to keep that tradition going. And we would look, I guess, from that perspective to collaborate on, maybe it's not always at the Mayor or the Capital Region Board, but with our technicians from the other municipality and those partnerships to ensure that that kind of traditional source of food and that traditional food system can have a good equilibrium with our rights, and then maybe even some economic opportunities with different municipalities and people around the region. So again, maybe a conversation down the road when we can actually just be a part of the plan.
Thank you. You've each reflected on the recent successes around the growth plan with Capital Region Board and the hard work, and I'm sure I know those were difficult conversations where you're balancing growth usually means you're talking about not growing somewhere as well, which is always a challenging conversation. But going forward, and there's talk about a regional agricultural master plan, and going forward and thinking about how our community is growing. What's the key to make sure we keep this progress going and to keep having those conversations about these agricultural land values? Anybody?
Sure. One of the keys is to make sure that you have people both at the elected and administrative levels that are really interested in making that happen. So you keep focused on it so you don't lose track of where you're going. There are people out there that would love to take that ship and turn it in a different direction. And I think it's important for all of us to make sure that we have those kinds of things happening and keep those people in place. It's just a long-term strategy that's going to pay off for all of us and help feed us all in the long run.
One of the other things that we're working towards is trying to figure out what the right tool is to evaluate the land. So there's a soil inventory or soil classification system, class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4. And so you can easily find those maps out there that'll say, well, this is the really, really good soil. And if you look at those maps, you'll see that the city of Edmonton is sitting already on a lot of that really good soil, which is one of the reasons why the city was built here in the first place. And then growth overtakes that, and like I said, turning that ship is tough. But we need a more sophisticated tool than just the soil quality, because if you have, that doesn't tell you the whole picture. And so there are tools out there. One is called LISA, or the Land Evaluation Site Assessment Tool, which has been used in other jurisdictions who've done exercises like this, that looks at the proximity to other conflicting uses, where heavy deep till agriculture might not be compatible with other things that are across a municipal border or across a road or downwind or something. It also looks at the economic factors and the pressure on the land, because if it's already trading speculatively at 2, 3, 4, 10 times what it's worth as agricultural land, then to try to intervene and potentially deal with compensation challenges to ensure that that land is in long-term production is going to have a substantial cost for someone. And unless you have a provincial government that's prepared to do the kind of intervention that we saw in Ontario around their places to grow legislation and development rate swapping and all these other tools, then that cost is a real barrier. And so you got to say, okay, are we inside that shadow? Are we outside that shadow? And so these site evaluation tools really help look at that full context and help you understand, okay, what has a really good prospect long-term to be saved? Let's carve that out now, 30 years away from development pressure. And then it's not nearly as complicated. So we need those evaluation tools that, like I said, are a little bit more than soil quality, though soil quality itself is a fundamental input into that evaluation matrix. So we've done quite a bit of work to look at that, and that's sort of an input into the next stage of work with this agricultural master plan for the region. But just as important as it identifies the land, it's also going to be one of these opportunities to look at the economic growth opportunities that come from preserving those lands, and where you might even cluster businesses or market opportunities, processing opportunities around the transportation infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So you can go a little bit further than just saying this is about stopping things. You can say this is about enabling new things to happen. Here are the conditions, regulatory conditions we need to put in place to facilitate that. So I think it's actually growth oriented. It's just a different kind of growth oriented.